Right, I think I'll start. Hi everybody, my name is Will Petty. I'm director of the co-director of the show and co-director of Bonas MacFarlane. We're on stand. I've forgotten. It's over there, stand 312, I think. And I'm going to whisk you through 11 tips to 11 plus. I'm going to go really quickly, and for a change, we're not going to do a Q&A. However, my team and I are on Bonas MacFarlane's stand for any questions afterwards. I will loiter with intent afterwards, but I obviously can't speak to absolutely everybody. If you go to our stand, there's more members of my team who are there you can speak to as well, or leave your details so we can get in touch with you next week, so on and so forth. Bit of background first. I will look at my watch, not because I'm bored of you, just to make sure I'm keeping time, because it's quite a tight schedule. Bonas MacFarlane, we're a full spectrum tuition consulting company. We specialise in placing, where I work in many ways, specialising in placing children into independent schools here in Britain at every age group, so 0 all the way through to university. We've been doing it for about 20 years, and we've learned quite a lot along the way. And our sister company is the show itself. So we kind of cover the full gamut of the spectrum, both working very directly with schools as customers as well as parents as customers. So a couple of weeks ago, someone asked me for a catchy title for this talk, and not really thinking and not realising it was me giving it, I just said 11 tips for 11 plus, and arrived here at sort of midday and was reminded of that, and it was me doing it. So quite quickly I wrote down 11 tips. I think I've covered most things, but I'm going to whiz through them reasonably quickly. And then this is my good friend Sam from Sam Tutoring. I've got that right, haven't I, Sam? And he's going to do a little bit at the end as well. And if you want to go and speak to his and his team after the talk, he's on stand 634. That's Sam Tutoring, stand 634. So what I've done is I've done 5 kind of tips for parents, and then 5 tips towards your children and what you're doing with them, and then 1 general tip for the whole family. We'll start with the parents. So the first thing I've written down is prepare yourselves. Okay, I mean kind of jokingly, mentally, but I'm semi-serious about that. The 11 plus has become quite an hysterical entry point in this city and country in the day school market. A lot goes on and it's quite tricky to navigate. That's because every school by and large does their own thing. There are some schools that group together to share some assessments, but there's a lot going on, and time and planning are your greatest friend. I would start taking it very seriously at the beginning of year 5, bearing in mind the assessments for the 11 plus take place around the autumn of year 6, going slightly into the new year depending on the school. So you get a chunk in December, a chunk more in January. So it's really important to sit down before year 5 starts and just look at your journey, your children's ages, when you need to do what, and properly make a plan, the kind of plan that you might be encouraging them to make when they're sitting down to revise for their GCSEs a few years down the line, and really making sure you've got a schedule that takes you through the sort of 18-month period that we're discussing. The admissions burden is really on you, and it's important that you prepare yourselves before you start communicating too much with your kids. They are children at 9, 10. They're not grown-ups, and frankly, you shouldn't be involving them in the decision-making too much. I see one little girl there with her headphones on is thinking, no, that's not happening. So there is a point to talk to your kids, but I would say that there's quite a lot of onus on you as mum and dad to get the homework done, not sort of drag them around loads of schools. It's exhausting, they won't remember, they won't thank you for it. Do your homework, show them places that they will love, and maybe don't let them make too many decisions all alone. The second one is don't panic. And I'm going to repeat that several times in the next 20 minutes. And I mean it. And you're all thinking, we're not going to panic. Yeah, you definitely are. Everybody does. I did. I am doing so now. My twin children are in year 6. I had to think about that. It's a bit of a worry. And they're not in London, thankfully, so the panic and anxiety where they live is a little bit more reduced. But it's really important. And the reason it's really important isn't the reason perhaps that you'd think. You don't need to tell your kids that you're worried for them to know. So thinking about not panicking from the beginning is really important. I've done this for 20 years and I've seen, maybe not it all, but I've seen a lot And a lot of energy, negative energy, can come from the parents, totally unintentionally. So you need to proactively think about the atmosphere that is at home and the communication you are giving, but also the communication you don't think you're giving, right? The vibe you're giving off, one might say in modern parlance. Again, going back to the time from the preparation tip, time is your friend, and if you get things organised in good time, panic shouldn't have to set foot in your house. Number 3 is research, or as the kids would call it, homework. Do your homework. Not every school is right for your kids. Far from it. The great Rafe Lucas from the Good Schools Guide often used to say at talks here over this weekend that, it's a two-way fit, a school. You're not just thinking what's right for my child. The school is thinking, while they're doing that, which child is right for us. It's a fit. It's a bit like matchmaking. A lot of parents that I've come across over the years, some parents I should say, have go and look at the A-level results and don't really look at their kid at all and go, right, well, that's got the best results, we'll go there. Okay, fine. If it's got the best results, that means that, or like the top academic results in GCSEs and A-levels, that means that it has the highest selection standards. Quite a lot of head teachers will admit, maybe not about their own schools, but about the market, that looking at A-level and GCSE results doesn't measure output. It measures input. It just tells you what those kids were getting when they turned up. Okay? Picking a school that gets the very best results of these public exams, which, by the way, is not the most important thing in life, picking a school that does that does not mean that they're going to take your kid and wave a magic wand and turn them into someone with an IQ of 160. Okay, that's not what schools do. You're born with your IQ, not that we use that phrase anymore, but your raw intelligence and aptitude is kind of there from birth. You're looking for the place that's going to get the most out of it all the time. And you can look at the likes of the most selective schools, say, the likes of St Paul's or Westminster, and I'm always reminded when I look at those schools, which are fabulous, but I'm reminded of an advert I used to enjoy as a teenager at the cinema, and it was an advert for the Royal Marine Commandos, back when Pearl and Dean were big in movie advertising, and it was this horrible video of this guy being shot at, covered in muck and machine guns, and wading through a swamp, and all this kind of stuff, explosions going off everywhere, and then he would get to the end, and this thing would come up on the screen, Royal Marine Commandos, 99.9% need not apply. That's what the academic powerhouses are. They're not for almost everyone. Okay, that's a specific thing for those who are really academically obsessed, really punching through those early educational markers at a very high level compared to their peers. And so, just proceed with caution. You need to get to understand the schools and whether your child fits with them. The third I've gone through, and also within that research, you want to look at quite some big things that I'll sort of run through quickly. So that would include things like considering the qualifications you want. At sixth form now, there are choices. There are some schools offering IB, not loads in London. On the boarding market, there are many more. So looking at that, looking at single-sex school, co-educational school, both. The style of the school. What's the environment you're looking for? What do you want your child to be saying they did during their day when you pick them up? Or not when you pick them up when they go to senior school. Hopefully, after a while, they might find their own way home. Logistics, obviously, where you're living. Can you move? Are you planning on moving if you don't find the scope of senior school around you? Looking at that as a fabulous website, which I have no benefit in recommending. I don't sadly own any shares in the company, but it's called locrating.com, as in loc from location and rating, as in stars. And that's a really good place where you can put lots of filters in and look at the map of the whole country and see the schools in those areas. So that can help you if you're considering moving to get a really good range of schools in that area to apply to. Inner London is not awash with senior schools. I'm famous, or infamous probably, for saying that the worst thing you can be in London as a boy, is a boy going into the 11 plus. There are not many options. This is not a city loaded with private schools. The ones we've got are fabulous, but there are nowhere near like as many as everyone thinks. Historically, we're a nation of boarding schools in the private system, so there's a very good reason for that, let alone the price of land in London, particularly centrally. So do think about the logistics. What you really it's all very well finding a fabulous school, but if your child is doing 2.5 hours commuting in a car every day there and back, that's a lot of time that they're not using constructively. And constructively could be socializing with their friends. But being sat in a car, that's not constructive. So really think about that. A lot of clients I've worked with over the years who've gone for something really big but not wanted to move from sort of lovely Kensington, but chosen an incredible school in North London, and all of them have come back and be like, you know what, that commute, we shouldn't have done that. It's a disaster, it's ridiculous. We're getting through it, but none of her friends live nearby, blah, blah, blah. And do think about that. The logistics aren't just you, it's them when they get there. When you're looking at starting this, they're still quite young and they're kids. Very soon after they arrive at senior school, they get very grown up very fast. So try and imagine that student as well and plan for that, because they're going to change dramatically in these years. It's probably one of the biggest, periods of change for child development. How have we got to? Resources. So resources, I don't mean yet, I'm coming to that later, but in terms of parent resources, I'm not talking about just learning material. I'm talking about things like the Good Schools Guide, reputable professional services that give advice either online or in a massive great book, or companies like Sam's and mine, where you can come and get professional advice, where we're checking all these facts, and we're really, you can be sure the information you're getting is accurate and unbiased. Visit. Go and visit these schools. This is quite tricky in central London because you often are only allowed to go very near to when you apply. There are a few ways around that. You can always do a few drive-bys just to get a sense of the scale of the property, kind of kids that are pouring out at the end of the day or beginning of the day, pouring in. And the local area can teach you quite a lot about the expectations of families that live there, and therefore what they're demanding from their school. And that might give you a little bit more insight into that. But book early for these. It's a bit mosh pity. These literally, they sell tickets on Eventbrite, these open days now. So make sure you've got awareness of when those dates are coming. If they're full, they're full. So you really need to make sure you're planning for that, organised for that. Since COVID, there's been a massive backlog of visits to get through. So the rules around when you can visit are quite extensive, to be honest. At some point, you should try and take your kids. If you're going to ask them to sit down and work a bit harder and do a bit more work, which you probably are, than they're getting from their current school, then it pays to get them excited about what they're aiming for. If they understand why they're having tuition on a Monday night after a long day at school in November, and they know what the goal is, there's a chance they're going to be easier to engage, easier to motivate and inspire in that relatively rapid journey. Right, that's you parents. Now, kids. Oh, sorry, just lastly, just tracking back to resources, learning materials. I'm not going to name companies because it's not really fair. There are a good few of them here today, but we are at a time now where there's lots more resources online. There used to be very, very few. And a very peculiar time where some of the people selling these resources are also the people creating the tests for the schools themselves. So they are much more in line with what's actually going to happen on assessment dates than they have been at any point in our history so far in the schools world. So make sure you really get your head around that. There are lots of different admissions processes. There are certain schools that just have one, they don't share it with anyone, you have to do theirs. So you need to look at your child's assessment calendar once you've chosen the schools that you're aiming for and see, right, well, hang on a minute, if our favourite school that we really think he or she is going to get into is on Monday the 11th of Tuesday the 12th of January, we don't want to go into a really, really challenging school that frankly we don't think he or she will get or get in. Don't knacker them out on the Monday doing something you're probably not going to make or not enjoy or not accept. Make sure they're fighting fit for your top choices. So it's really important. Some schools inevitably always clash on their dates, so you need to speak to everybody, check those clash dates, see what your alternative date is going to be from whichever school you speak to about giving you one, and get a big planner up on the wall and do it the old-fashioned way, or create something I wouldn't understand on your telephone to do it for you, that kind of thing. But again, it's all about the planning, the timing, the organisation to make your lives easier, you less stressed, therefore your children less stressed as you go through this process. So with the kids, I sort of touched on this a few times. Be realistic, okay? be realistic, and that feeds straight into assess. There are loads of assessments out there. Some are very hands-off, they're online. You can plug your child in, walk away, and it'll spit out a bunch of scores. Fine. They give you a rough marker. It won't tell you anything, you won't get anything written down, there'll be no observational data. So I would recommend looking at places that offer verified assessments. Obviously Bonas MacFarlane do. But we use the industry standard EdSite, which is quite unusual because we have that in-house within our colleagues who are capable of delivering those. And unlike ones that you will find on Harley Street and elsewhere in educational centres, we can get that organised in a couple of weeks as opposed to 6 weeks to a couple of months. But it will give you, when you get a good one, a real platform, something you can share amongst yourselves and family, understand how best your child's learned. You might want to share them with your current school if there's particularly interesting things in there that need attention. Could be some learning difficulties that get uncovered, and that might help you understand the best way to prepare as well. But also it's a really good way to hand it to a tutor. There's a lot of tuition businesses out there, a lot of them are fabulous, but there's a lot of one-man bands, and it's very difficult to know who's good and who's not until you engage them, really. But if they're given this, and you've got it too, a really thorough report that really tells them where the black spots are for this particular child, what they can be spending their time doing best, what you can expect from them stamina-wise, that's really going to help as a foundational base for your tuition, and also understanding what schools are appropriate to apply to. Okay, you hear some numbers around. So if you do a Cat 4 test, which lots of your children will be doing at their prep schools anyway, state primaries as well, in some cases, you'll hear, well, don't apply to the really top schools unless you're getting an average of over 120 in those. The statistical ceiling being about 145, something like that. And I guess that's quite a useful statistic, because at least it tells you if you're below that, you really shouldn't be applying. But just remember that if you're looking at the very, very top schools, it might say you need a 120 to even think about it, but the average score of a child actually winning a place is going to be more like 140 plus. So do bear that in mind. Not all these, as Disraeli said, there are lies, damn lies, and then there are statistics. Okay, and all of us in all industries, so there's no criticism to any individual or institution here, we all sort of tweak those numbers to get the message across that we want to get across. But just make sure that you're reading in between the lines all the time. To tutor or not to tutor, I think Sam and I would both say tutor. Tutoring doesn't have to be an external professional, although that's what I'd recommend. I think being a tutor as a parent is a terrible idea. I sat my son down in his first piece of homework in reception and quickly realised, despite being a professional tutor historically, that there was no way we were ever doing that again. I think I cried before he did. So that's really, I would always go external. Of course I would, I'm a founder of a tuition company, but again, having an external influence, objective from school, coming into the home, that's something that could reduce your anxiety, increase your child's motivation. But if it's not working, your child doesn't like it, stop, change tutors. Don't be, not all paths end in a dead end. And remember, in education generally, particularly in 11th class, nothing is a dead end, right? Everyone is, with all the deadlines that we create and the bureaucratic sort of vibe that us Brits have, you're made to feel like, oh, if it doesn't work out now, it's never going to work. It's not true. There are always measures you can take if things go disastrously wrong. There are not. What you don't see in September is a bunch of children walking around outside without a school desk. And by and large, these systems are quite complicated and quite confusing, but they do basically work. Almost all children in this system end up where they should be. Whether you agree with where they should be or not, it's totally different. I can't help with that. I've now written parent actually. So I'm not talking about I'm talking about being a parent, not being a friend, okay? Don't involve them in every decision. Do your job first before they come anywhere near it. They do not have to be at the table. I think, current climate, children are growing up far too quickly, in my opinion, in some instances, particularly in massive conurbations like London, and you're doing them a big favour by not involving them on day one. Okay, there's a lot you can do that they don't need to hear about. And also, it's going to help with that, the atmosphere in the home and you being a bit calmer because you've done that. So they're not going to sort of pick up on, oh God, mum and dad look really anxious about tomorrow. Which leads me to, when you're going to those assessments, try not to make a massive song and dance. Whatever morning routine you do that day, keep it. Don't suddenly, everyone take the day off work, get dressed up in a different outfit and go, we're all going together. And they're going, what? This is different, why is it different? Don't do that. If it's the nanny that takes them, the nanny takes them to the 11 plus. It's not a sport. You don't want to watch it. It's horrific. So please, try and keep everything as normal and consistent as possible. It all helps. Every little helps. Rest. Rest them. Right? I've already mentioned the admissions calendar. Think about that. Think about their activities in the assessment periods. They don't need to be going to late night after school clubs when the sun goes down at 4:30 in the pouring cold and the rain. Okay, they need to be at home. Not necessarily working. They need to be getting some rest, lots of it. The night before the assessments, think about what they're eating the night before. Think about what they have for breakfast. Avoid all the obvious stuff, no Cocoa Pops, that kind of thing. Think about that. Again, don't change too much. Don't give them loads of signals. So if you're going to make changes like that, do them incrementally as best you can. And the last one applies to the whole family unit. Breathe. It will be all right. You will get there. Everybody does at some point. And if you all do it together and you have a bit of a sense of looking after one another as you go through it, because it is stressful no matter how well prepared you are, it's a lot. And it's a lot at a really young age. If I was creating the whole system from scratch, there's no way we'd be doing assessments at 11. That's completely unrealistic, but I can say that up here. That's it from me, guys. Again, we're on stand 312, I think. Bonas MacFarlane. I'm going to hand you over to Sam.
As Will said, I run Sam Tutoring. I have been running Sam Tutoring for about 13 years, so full-time 10 years. So in terms of the independent school system, my students have got offers to a lot of the big schools, many of them here, and many of your, kind of bombastic world brand names as well, like your Eatons and your Benningtons and, all of these things. So what I thought would be useful is to take you through kind of my process, because like Will said, we would both love for you to come over to our stand and hire our services. But I might surprise you by saying this, you don't actually need a tutor to prepare adequately for the 11 plus. But what you do need is a plan. And what most people don't have is time to execute this plan properly. One of the things I always say when I speak to parents and all of this is that it's better to train hard, fight easy. And what I mean by that is preparation, preparation, preparation. Yes, children do have different aptitudes, but these exams are not taken out of thin air. They're based on the curriculum. So if you understand how children are assessed, you can reverse engineer that. Now, obviously, professionals like myself and Will do this for a living, so we see this all day long. So if you do want to take this on yourself, by all means, it's possible, but just be warned that you are letting yourself in for quite an uphill battle. And obviously, I do have much sympathy for all of you here, because the kind of London scene right now is a bit of an arms race, whereby parents really do understand how difficult it is, and I have conversations with people panicking and their child is 5, so I definitely do understand. And I think schools sometimes make the application process a bit opaque on purpose, because there's a bit of mystique, like, how do I know if my child's ready, how do I know this, how do I know that? So you have to ask more questions, you have to dig a bit deeper, but I'll make it really simple for you in terms of what preparation is needed. So broadly speaking, and this is not for every school, but broadly speaking, you're going to be tested on 4 main areas. So your maths, English, verbal reasoning, and non-verbal reasoning. Obviously, verbal reasoning, non-verbal reasoning is based on maths and English. So doing maths and English and where your child is with that in relation to the national curriculum is normally a good indication of where they are right now. Now, what I would say is, if they're performing well in their school, in their class, fantastic. But realistically, they're going to need to be at least a couple of years above what the standard level is. It's not uncommon for my students to be doing, light minor GCSE works. We had an interesting phenomenon this exam season. So we also do the common entrance within the company. And 2 of my students were preparing for that, and they were in a room with my GCSE students that were preparing for their GCSEs. And I got asked the question, Sam, why are they doing the same work as us? And that's the reality of what some of these entrance exams entail. Now, your kind of key stage 2 curriculum, so your percentages, your decimals, your fractions, you're going to need to know them inside out, backwards and forwards, because everything that happens, especially in the maths paper, is some kind of iteration of that. Similarly, with English, you know you're going to be doing some kind of comprehension. There's going to be a composition. You're going to have to write something. You're going to be able to articulate yourself. So things that should be a given at that age are kind of put on steroids. So full sentences, dialogue, doing interesting things like literary devices, like your metaphors, all of these things, you need to know them backwards and forwards, front and back. Now, when it comes to preparation, a key thing I would say, start as early as you can, get into a rhythm. If you have kind of 6 months intensive, yes, it can work, definitely, but it's much better to build up gradually so it becomes kind of inbuilt in terms of what they're doing and stuff. Now, if you're applying for a bursary or a scholarship, please do understand you will need to be in the 90th percentile, ideally, of the cohort that's applying. And I know everybody's at different places and they have different requirements in terms of what they need. But if you are looking for a scholarship, a bursary, anything like that, you have to be not only passing, you have to be the top of the top. Because like Will said, what you're actually doing when you're applying for an independent school is you're making a case for your child. You're making a proposal. Now, these are all charities. They have to give out money to people, but they have discretion on who they give the money to. So you're making the best case for your child. So all of these children applying are going to be fantastically academic. So if you want to kind of round out your application, have something interesting. So maybe instruments, sports, and even in instruments, if they play a bit of a funky instrument, maybe like an oboe or a viola or something like that, you want to give yourself your application to make it as attractive as possible. Now, when it comes to preparation, I'm a massive sport fan, and when I prepare my students, we do something called exam labs. And basically what that is like training camp in boxing. It's all about reps. So when the child is getting into the exam, they're not seeing anything they haven't seen before. It's just muscle memory, muscle memory, muscle memory. So if you're aiming for the top percentile, they shouldn't have to think about what they're doing. I'm honestly of the opinion that the vast majority of children can do very, very well in entrance exams. It's just that the preparation is different, and some of them don't get access to quality preparation. So for me, any school is possible. Whether it's the right fit for your child is a completely different question, but actually passing and getting to interview stage, unless your child has maybe very, very severe learning needs or anything like that that would prevent them or impact their learning, I don't see any reason why it's not possible. But you have to understand how your child is going to be examined, the actual format, question by question. Once you understand that, you reverse engineer and prepare them, see where they're weak, and then you kind of fill in the gaps. So I'm not sure how long I have. Yep, time is up. So I'm on stand 634 over there. I'll be more than happy to speak to any of you. Thank you so much for your attention.